Tutbury Castle is a largely ruined medieval castle in Tutbury, Staffordshire, England, in the ownership of the Duchy of Lancaster and hence currently of King Charles III. It's a scheduled ancient monument, and people who have stayed in the castle include Eleanor of Aquitaine and Mary Queen of Scots, which we'll come on to later. The castle has been the most important factor in the history of the town. In the Iron Age, about 2,500 years ago, Tutbury was a hill fort. The Tutbury version was not as large as or so well preserved, but you can still see it in places, and it owes its majestic situation to the hill on which it stands. The castle was built on an isolated rock with a deep foss on three sides, over 90 feet wide and 40 feet deep, and running into the cliff at each of its extremities. This foss was dug through the hill of red marl associated with alabaster rock. The original entrance was between two large flattened mounds that would have been defended by stockades of timber stakes twined with thorn hedges and where animals would be pastured. The fortifications were adapted and improved by the Anglo-Saxons, and soon after Henry de Ferrers built the first castle that would have been a rough and ready wooden one. Quite soon the stone one would replace it, and this was done by one of the early Ferrers earls. William de Ferrers, 3rd Earl of Derby, joined a rebellion against Henry II in 1173-74, and Tutbury Castle was one of at least 20 castles belonging to the rebels that was slighted. The castle was destroyed, but some of the bases of these walls still remain. The chapel in the middle of the courtyard was built about this time. The castle was rebuilt by 1201 when King John came to stay. The castle was nearly destroyed by Prince Edward in 1264 after the rebellion of Robert de Ferrers, 6th Earl of Derby. Prince Edward, who had escaped from Robert de Ferrers, demolished it again. In 1269, after a further rebellion, the lands were given to Edmund Crouchback and have remained part of the Duchy of Lancaster ever since. By the 1300s, the castle was largely repaired, though as a residential castle rather than a military strongpoint. Edmund Crouchback, the first Earl of Lancaster, began restoration about 1270, and his son Thomas continued from 1298 onwards. He built a large hall, a range of buildings, and what is mistakenly called John of Gaunt's Gateway in 1313-14. This was made of sandstone, and the 4,267 stones came from the quarry in Winds Hill. It cost £100. He also built chambers and storage rooms that were still standing at the end of the 16th century, but during the Battle of Burton Bridge, the castle was looted and damaged, but not destroyed. In 1326, when Thomas's brother Henry took over, there were many facilities. Some time before 1370, the castle was even more substantially rebuilt again by John of Gaunt. From 1372 until her death in 1394, the castle was the permanent residence of Constance, the wife of John of Gaunt. Her court lavishly patronised music and the arts, and was said to have been somewhat similar to a modern Windsor in its ambition. When John of Gaunt was a boss, there are records of carpenters and masons building and repairing. Between 1399 and 1406, a wall and tower were built using stone from Repton, and in 1401 these walls were recorded as 20 foot high and 6 feet thick. More new walls were built by King Henry IV between 1412 and 1418, and all through the 15th century, new building and repair was undertaken using alabaster from Fold and stone from Winds Hill. The castle then starts to decay as it ceased to be the Lord's principal residence. In 1516 the kitchen roof fell in, and in 1523 a section of the wall split for 100 feet. It was still habitable when Mary was imprisoned. She made a lot of comments about the unsanitary conditions, but after that it continued to decay. Now Mary Queen of Scots has a very close link with Tutbury Castle, so what I'll do now is talk about her relationship with the castle. So in June 1568, Mary Queen of Scots was at Carlisle Castle after fleeing from Scotland after a defeat at the Battle of Langside, and the English Privy Council decided to lodge her either at Nottingham, Fotheringhay or Tutbury, so that she was further from the Scottish border or Yorkshire. In January 1569, the Scottish Queen was taken from Bolton Castle
going first to Ripon and staying a night nearby, then to Wetherby, staying a night with John Vavasour at Hazelwood Castle, then on to Pontefract, Rotherham, Chesterfield and Wingfield Manor. George Talbot, the 6th Earl of Shrewsbury, was given detailed instructions for keeping Mary, which permitted him to lodge her at Sheffield from time to time, which he preferred, and briefed him what he should say to her regarding her political predicament. Mary was allowed an excursion to Stockley Park to try out her greyhound in July 1585. Tapestries, furniture and bedding were sent from the Royal Wardrobe at the Tower of London to furnish Tutbury. Because of delays caused by poor weather, Bess of Hardwicke was asked to send her things from Sheffield. This left the Earl's houses at Sheffield unfurnished, so Mary had to go to Tutbury. She arrived on the 4th of February 1569. She noted the castle was like a hunting lodge with its enclosure on a slight hill, reminiscent of the Bois de Vincennes, and complained of the damp, the wet plaster and draughty, ill-fitting old carpentry. In March, the Earl of Shrewsbury described how Mary sat with Bess, Countess of Shrewsbury, in the Countess's chamber at Tutbury with Lady Livingston and Mary Seaton working at embroidery. She moved to Wingfield Manor in April, and Mary was returned to Tutbury in September with increased guard and a reduced household. In November 1569, following the Catholic rising of the north, Mary was rushed south to Coventry, where she stayed in an inn. Elizabeth sent orders for her return to Tutbury on Christmas Eve. The poor prisoner as she described herself, was back at Tutbury on the 2nd of January 1570, and Mary was sent to Chatsworth in May 1570. In January 1585, she once again returned to Tutbury via Wingfield Manor, and on the way stayed a night in Derby in the house of a widow, Mrs. Beaumont. Her keepers, Ralph Sadler and John Summer, were made busy providing satisfactory hangings for Mary's bedchamber. Hangings brought from Lord Paget's nearby houses at Burton and Beaudesert were unsatisfactory. The Queen's bedchamber was located at the top of a lodging immediately under its roof, which was built against the castle wall. This room was of timber construction and had no windows looking out through the castle wall. Its 2 windows looked into the castle court. To increase the warmth of her bedchamber, Mary improvised a tent of tapestry over her bed. The French diplomat, Michel de Castelnau, wrote to Mary's son, James VI. He reported Mary's optimism and her pleasure in her new lodgings at Tutbury. Mary had a billiard table at Tutbury, and Ralph Sadler sometimes took Mary hunting with his hawks on the River Dove, no farther than 3 miles from the castle, with a guard of 40 or 50 men on horseback. Queen Elizabeth disapproved of this freedom and forbade it. On 19th of April 1585, Mary was placed in the care of Sir Amias Paulet, who took down Mary's cloth of estate from the chamber where he ate, and stopped Mary's servants using the wall walk near the gate. Paulet was also curtailed her charitable activities in the town and disarmed her Scottish servants, many of whom had pistols. In July, she was allowed to hunt her ground after deer at Stockley Park near Anslow. By August, Mary was anxious to move temporarily to another house so her lodgings could be swept and cleaned. Mary pointed out that the Earl of Shrewsbury followed this routine. However, Lord Paget's nearby houses and the house of Henry Cavendish, son of William Cavendish, at Dugwich were not suitable to house all their train of servants. Paulet considered modifying her lodging or letting the Queen use another part of the castle which he occupied. Security was difficult for this other lodging where Mary had stayed in 1569. It had 2 chambers 24 feet above ground level, with windows overlooking the dykes towards Tutbury town. The windows in the house of office of the latrine could have been used for escape. So on Christmas Eve 1585 she finally moved to Chartley Castle. A survey in 1597 found repairs to the North Tower were needed but not carried out because the builder's estimate of £200 was too much. In 1609, the dilapidations were estimated at £1,000, but it was still habitable. By the late 16th century, the fabric of the castle began to decay. Although James I stayed there a number of times between 1619 and 1624. In August 1624, he knighted Sir Henry Rainsford of Clifford Chambers and Sir Edward Vernon of Sudbury at the castle. King James I had the main building replaced in 1631 to serve him on his hunting trips. During the English Civil War, the castle was held by Royalist forces and refortified for the Crown. In 1643, parliamentary forces attempted unsuccessfully to dislodge the garrison, and in April 1646 the garrison surrendered after a 3-week siege. Following the siege, a treaty of surrender was agreed upon, and the conditions were drawn up by Sir Andrew Niverton, the governor of Tutbury Castle, with the agreement being signed on the 20th of April 1646. However, in the following year, on 19th of July 1647, it was determined that the castle was untenable, following the siege and damages caused to the castle. Finally in control of the castle, Parliament ordered the fortification to be destroyed and demolition work being carried out from 1647 to 1648 on the orders of Oliver Cromwell, who wanted to make sure that it wasn't used against him. Cromwell instructed 15 local men to do the work and paid them £2, 10 shillings and 4pence, but they took 2 years over it and only did it half-heartedly. Much of the stone and timber was taken away by the townspeople to use in the building of their own homes. After the restoration of the monarchy, some rooms were repaired, and in 1681 it was leased to Lord Vernon of Sudbury Hall, in whose family it remained until 1864. It was one of the Vernons who built the Folly or Mock Ruin on top of the High Mound in 1780. He thought that it improved the skyline and impressed visitors at Sudbury. They also had the crinkly bits built on top of the house for some reason. Incidentally, there was a real tower on the mound originally, and the Folly now has a big crack down the side. In the early 19th century, the castle was converted into a farm and some buildings were added. In 1832, a proposal to turn it into a prison was rejected, and by the mid-19th century the castle had started to become a tourist attraction. Admission charges were introduced in 1847, and it was also used for village fetes, but unfortunately these Victorians did a lot of damage and indulged in a lot of graffiti. There was an extensive project of preservation undertaken in 1913, and in 1952 the farm ceased and the cowshed was turned into a tea room. In very recent years, 1980 onwards, the castle has been used for fetes, medieval banquets, reconstructed sieges, firework displays, wedding receptions, traction rides and so on. Now in the 21st century, the present custodian is sensitively restoring the castle, and more of its history is gradually being revealed.